The President of Peru, Boluarte, testified before the public prosecutor's office as part of a preliminary investigation for genocide, aggravated homicide, and injuries. France's trade unions increased nationwide strikes and protests against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reform. At least 15 people were killed and more than 100 were injured in Bangladesh's capital after an explosion inside an office building in a commercial district. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Peruvian President Boluarte testified on Tuesday before the public prosecutor's office as part of a preliminary investigation for genocide, aggravated homicide, and injuries. The investigation came as a result of the death report in the Andean regions caused by the state's repression of anti-government demonstrations. Boluarte attended the public prosecutor's office for the third time after her request to be questioned at the government palace was denied. The probe also included Prime Minister Alberto Otarola, who assured that neither he nor the ministers are responsible for the violent repression against protesters, pointing to the armed forces and the police as the only ones to blame. In the past 3 months, at least 48 demonstrators have been killed at the protests against Boluarte administration, while dozens others have died as a consequence of the social crisis. Meanwhile, former Peruvian President Pedro Castillo appeared on Tuesday for his pre-trial detention hearing, facing possible charges of criminal organization, influence peddling, and collusion building committed during his administration. If found guilty, Castillo could remain 36 months in prison. Also included in the investigation are former ministers Heinier Alvarado of Housing and Sanitation and Juan Silva of Transport and Communications. Accompanied by his lawyer, Eduardo Pachas, the former head of state appeared in the virtual hearing presided by Supreme Judge Juan Carlos Keckley. Castillo has been serving 18 months of preventive detention in the Barbadillo prison since his ousting and imprisonment on December 7, 2022. Also in Peru, human rights organizations and other non-governmental institutions have described the Boluarte administration's police repression of indigenous peoples who reject the government as violent and racist. A total of 25 human rights entities and NGOs have expressed their rejection of the repression against the demonstrators through a statement in which they state that the forces of law and order in the country are exercising racist violence against the native Aymara peoples in Lima, especially against women and children. The organizations also expressed their solidarity with those affected by the crackdown on Saturday, March 4th, in the southern city of Yuli, while condemning the arrival and increase of armed and police forces into that city, something that they affirm causes fear and distrust. And in the context of social unrest demanding Boluarte's resignation in Peru, ronderos from at least 7 regions in the north will take part in the second takeover of Lima to be held on March 13th, demanding political changes in the country. Groups of volunteers which provide community justice in rural areas known as the ronderos will begin their journey to the capital on March 9th from the regions of Ancash, La Libertad, Cajamarca, Lambayeque, Piura, Amazonas, and San Martin. With this initiative, the ronderos will also mark the beginning of a strike led by the community justice group of the mentioned departments. Among the main demands are the resignation of President Boluarte, the closure of Congress, and a constituent process. 2 of the 4 U.S. citizens who went missing after a violent kidnapping in Mexico last week have been found dead, and 2 are alive, Mexican authorities said on Tuesday. According to Tamaulipas General Attorney Edwin Barrios Mujica, as a result of joint search efforts, the 4 U.S. citizens who had been kidnapped were found last Friday, 2 of them alive and the other 2 dead. Barrios Mujica also stated that 1 Mexican citizen had died as well. According to the General Attorney, investigation and intelligence work continues in order to capture those responsible. For his part, Tamaulipas Governor Americo Villarreal said that 1 of the surviving U.S. citizens was wounded and the other was not. Addressing the incidents, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said his government was collaborating with the FBI in the investigation and lamented the death of the 2 U.S. citizens. Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, who has been in the United States since December 30th, will return to his country on March 15th, according to statements made by his son, Senator Flavio Bolsonaro, on social media. Afterwards, the senator added this is a probable date, although it is not confirmed. Bolsonaro is temporarily residing in the U.S. city of Orlando, to where he traveled even before completing his term. Brazilian presidency authorized at the end of February the permanence of 2 guards who will continue to accompany the former head of state until March 15th. According to different media outlets, the former military is receiving pressure from allies to return to Brazil and lead the opposition, but has delayed the return in fear of judicial processes underway. Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez considered the International Treaty on Marine Biodiversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction a historic and beneficial fact for the nations of the South. In his Twitter account, the Foreign Minister pointed out that the so-called PBNJ agreed after complex discussions preceded by 10 years of negotiations is a historic text that marks a milestone in the conservation and sustainable use of life and ecosystems in the oceans. Rodriguez Parrilla added that Cuba had the honor of representing the group of 77 plus China, and that in that discussion it was possible to maintain the unity of the group until the end of the process, which made it possible to achieve favorable results for developing nations. This legal instrument will place 30% of the world's oceans in protected areas, allocate more money to marine conservation, and cover access to and use of marine genetic resources. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. France's trade unions stepped up nationwide strikes and protests to force a policy U-turn of President Emmanuel Macron's pension reform. Unions have vowed to bring the country to a standstill over the proposed changes, which include raising the retirement age from 62 to 64 and increasing the number of years workers have to make contributions for a full pension. President Emmanuel Macron put the plan at the center of his re-election campaign last year, and his cabinet said the changes are essential to prevent the pension system from falling into deficit in coming years. But they have faced fierce resistance from both Parliament and the street, with almost 2 in 3 people across the country supporting protests against it.
The battle begins today. In a few hours, we can say the whole country will come to a halt, as one after another, professions begin the fight, in a large number of sectors that are decisive for the life of the country. The strike is renewable, and we must expect that tomorrow and the day after tomorrow will be days of very intense and justified social mobilization.
In Russia, the Kremlin said the seizure of the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut is key to advancing its operation in the east of that country. According to Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu, the seizure of the city will give way to a new offensive operations on the defense lines of the Ukrainian army. The report says that in recent weeks, Russia had made steady progress advancing to control access points to the city from the north, east, and south. Meanwhile, Ukrainian authorities said that they will not give up the city and will send reinforcements. The president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, accused Ukraine and the Central Intelligence Agency of being behind an attack on a Russian military plane near Minsk late last month.
Security Service of Ukraine, as well as secretly the CIA, jointly worked out an operation against the Republic of Belarus. What we saw, the implementation of the operation in Belarus, was really something incredible. The most advanced technologies were used. The attacker received full training and was prepared for more than a month. After the training, he was thrown, as the KGB says, on our territory.
On Tuesday, China accused the United States of increasing tensions between the two countries and warned that this policy of the White House could lead to confrontation. After a press conference held during the first session of the 14th National People's Congress, China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang said Beijing will continue to follow the principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation to achieve a healthy and stable relationship with Washington. He also said that China will maintain the path of multilateralism to advance the democratization of international relations. The diplomat said that the United States only seeks to promote confrontation in order to undermine regional integration under pretended freedom ideals.
The United States Indo-Pacific strategy, while apparently aimed at defending freedom and openness, maintaining security and promoting prosperity in the region is, in fact, an attempt to form exclusive blocs to broker confrontation by plotting an Asia-Pacific version of NATO and to undermine regional integration.
During a press conference on the silence of the first session of the 14th National People's Assembly of China, Foreign Minister Qin Gang called for resuming peace talks in Ukraine as soon as possible.
The crisis in Ukraine has reached a critical juncture. We have to choose between stopping hostilities, restoring peace, and seeking a political settlement, or fueling the fire expanding the crisis and letting the situation get out of hand. Conflict, sanctions, and pressure cannot solve the problem. What we need now is calm, rationality, and dialogue. The process of peace talks must begin as soon as possible. The legitimate security concerns of all parties involved must be respected in order to find the right approach for long-term stability in Europe.
On the other hand, Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang said Tuesday that the Sino-Russian relations do not pose a threat to any country, while he stressed that cooperation between Beijing and Moscow will help promote multipolarity, democracy, and strategic balance in the world.
China and Russia working together will be a driving force towards multipolarity and greater democracy worldwide, and towards strategic balance and global stability. The more unstable the world becomes, the more imperative it is for China and Russia to steadily advance their relations.
teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat, dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. At least 15 people were killed and more than 100 were injured in Bangladesh capital on Tuesday after an explosion inside an office building in a commercial district. The blast tore the 4th and 5th floors of the 7-story building in Gulistan, a major hub for wholesale goods in Dhaka. Several floors of the building and sidewalls were destroyed in the explosion. More than 100 people were treated for head wounds, fractures, and other injuries at the Dhaka Medical College Hospital, and more than 150 firefighters were at the site to assist in rescue efforts. The cause of the blast remains unclear, but fatal building fires and explosions are common in Bangladesh. An explosion at an oxygen plant near the southern port city of Chittagong on Saturday killed 7 people. A fire and a subsequent explosion at a container depot in the same town in June last year killed more than 50 people. United States Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin arrived in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad on Tuesday in an UN-announced visit, moving to bolster U.S. ties. The visit came just days before the 20th anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion that ousted Saddam Hussein and triggered years of unrest. The country is continuing to fight against the extremist Islamic State group. Austin, the highest-ranking cabinet official to visit the country since the start of the Biden administration, met with Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, and he is expected to meet other senior officials while in the country. After his visit to Baghdad, Austin will return to Amman, Jordan, where he started his trip to the Middle East on Sunday. On Tuesday, Iran's Deputy Interior Minister Majid Mirahmadi announced the first arrest in the spate of mystery intoxication of schoolgirls. According to Mirahmadi, based on the investigation of the intelligence agency, a number of people have been arrested in 5 provinces and the relevant agencies are conducting a full investigation. More than 5,000 Iranian school children have been affected by the spate of poisoning that has targeted mainly female pupils, according to a lawmaker investigating the cases. Scores of schools have been hit with pupils suffering symptoms ranging from shortness of breath to nausea and vertigo after reporting unpleasant odors on school premises. After the incident, some have been treated in hospitals. Nigeria's opposition leader Atiku Abubakar, who came second in a February 25th presidential poll, took to the streets on Monday along with his supporters to contest the election results. Abubakar supporters and members of his People's Democratic Party dressed in black to march to the headquarters of the Independent National Electoral Commission in Abuja and file a petition alleging electoral fraud. The commission has acknowledged that there were technical difficulties on polling day, but rejects the allegations of fraud. Peter Obi of the Labour Party, which came in third in the election, has also rejected the results and said he would go to court to prove to Nigerians that he won the presidential elections. With 93.4 million registered voters, the turnout was just over 27%, even lower than in the 2019 election. Rescue efforts are underway in parts of Malaysia after a season of floods killed at least 5 people and displaced over 40,000. In this sense, the National Flood Disaster Agency confirmed Johor, with a population of 4 million, is the worst hit by the season's floods. Tens of thousands of its residents have now moved to relief centers in schools and community halls. Meanwhile, experts from the country's meteorological department warned that the wet weather could continue until April. Malaysia, like many of its Southeast Asian neighbors, is vulnerable to seasonal floods. Neighboring Singapore has seen heavy torrential rain since February. In Indonesia, rescuers continue searching for 47 people who are believed to be buried in their houses by landslides that tore through villages on the country's Natuna Islands after torrential rains. Officials also added that at least 10 people were confirmed dead. According to the National Disaster Management Agency, 8 others were pulled alive with injuries, 3 of whom were in critical conditions. In this sense, government officials reported that 47 people were trapped in 27 houses that were buried on Monday under tons of mud from surrounding hills. The recent landslide displaced more than 1,000 people who were taken to evacuation centers and other shelters. Likewise, National Disaster Management Agency spokesperson Abdul Muhari said 2 helicopters and several vessels carrying rescuers, medical teams, and relief supplies had departed Jakarta and nearby islands to assist the search. We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.